There could also be a dead end. Many times you have an IP address in a place like Nigeria and not at the location. But law enforcement has been able to extract some information that is somewhat telling. When I say it's telling, meaning it does corroborate what Nancy was wearing. So what we're looking to focus on is there any proof of life? The negotiators, the hostage negotiators are going to continue to try to connect with the kidnappers, because what it does is it buys time. The kidnappers, believe it or not, want to get this done as quick as possible. And you look at it historically, there's a very low percentage of these kidnappings that have been successful. But at the same token, we want to continue that discourse between law enforcement and the kidnappers to get Nancy home safe and take them into custody.
Ellie Honey, counselor, you know, obviously former federal prosecutor, you've been involved in so many different law enforcement efforts. In this case, you have local police, you have the FBI now. Is there a role for the lawyers? What are they doing at this point?
There is, John. So as Lieutenant Porcher said, the top priority, the only priority right now, is the safe return of Ms. Guthrie and the identification of her attackers. But a lot of the steps that you're going to take investigatively to find the attackers are also going to become important evidence down the line. So for example, the reason you secure the home, the reason you look at every inch for forensics is because you want to figure out who did this, but that's also going to become crucial evidence down the line. Now, the role of prosecutors right now is in a supporting capacity. So I assure you there is a team of prosecutors standing by. So if investigators need a search warrant, if they suddenly need to get into a home or a car, there are prosecutors ready to draft up those affidavits, to go find the judge. If it's after hours or on a weekend, you have to know who is the emergency on-duty judge. You go to their house if you need to get those warrants sworn out. So the job right now for prosecutors is support the investigation. The prosecution will come later, but a lot of the evidence that's being garnered will come into play.
And when you say be ready to act suddenly, Ellie, I imagine, or I would have to believe, or let me put it this way, I certainly hope that they have the capability of acting in seconds if there's reason to.
Yeah, so I haven't been in a situation quite like this, but I have been in emergency situations. What you want to have up on your computer screen is as much of a search warrant affidavit as you know. So I promise you, every time new evidence comes in, a new ransom note, you are plugging that into your document so that when that moment comes, when a police officer calls and says, okay, we're at such and such a location, we need a search warrant, all you do is just plug in that 1 or 2 sentences, you dash it off. Again, you are in immediate contact. There's always going to be an emergency judge or magistrate 24/7. You have to know how to get to that person. But yes, you want to be in position to act within minutes.
Yeah, minutes matter here, seconds matter here. And Lieutenant, you mentioned hostage negotiators here. There's no negotiation, at least directly. So how do negotiators, if they're involved here, to the extent they're involved, what is their area of expertise and how are they trying to work without being able to make direct contact with whoever has Nancy Guthrie?
For starters, the negotiators are working in tandem with the family because they're trying to develop, or they have developed, a level of confidence, whereas the family is comfortable speaking to the negotiator. So when we look to what was the statements that were made by Savannah Guthrie as well as her brother, this is something that was constructed by the negotiator to get the appropriate messaging out there, because we want to make sure that we do have a level of correspondence. They want Nancy as quick as possible. The hostage negotiator, the hostage takers want this money as quick as possible. But another thing we have to bear in mind, there are hoaxes out there. We just arrested someone recently for a hoax as it relates to this ransom demand. So we need to authenticate and make sure that this is sound before we move forward.
And it is worth noting, at least as far as we can tell, this new video that came from the Guthrie family last night came out at about the time that one of the purported ransom deadlines was passing. They do seem to be in sync there, perhaps even deliberately sent out. Ellie, you know, again, lots of law enforcement involved here. What's the division between this local, state, and federal of how this is going?
In an ideal scenario, John, and it does appear this is happening here, you'll have coordination between the state and the feds, because sometimes they have different capacities. So for example, your locals might have better access to your forensics processing, right? To be able to take a hair sample, a blood sample, and process it quickly. But on the other hand, the feds might be better to get up on a wiretap quickly or to get a search warrant quickly. So you need to basically triage here and use whoever's in best position. But it does appear, to the credit of the local authorities, they are working hand in hand. You have sheriffs, you have local police, you have feds involved, and that's the best possible way to approach this.
Yeah, let's hope. Ellie Honig, Darren Porcher, thanks so much for all your help on this. Sarah?
Good evening, I'm Laura Coates. Nancy Guthrie's family is waiting. They are hoping for any sign, any word that she is safe. The first deadline from unverified ransom notes sent to multiple media outlets, that has now passed. The FBI confirmed in a news conference today it was set for 5 o'clock. Right after that time passed, Savannah Guthrie's brother Cameron issued this plea.
Whoever is out there holding our mother, we want to hear from you. We haven't heard anything directly. We need you to reach out, and we need a way to communicate with you so we can move forward. But first, we have to know that you have our mom. We want to talk to you, and we are waiting for contact.
It was just last night that Nancy's children released their first message asking for proof of life. And now we have some context as to why they're putting out these videos. TMZ got one of the ransom notes, and RV11, TMZ's founder, is revealing new information about what it says.
The letter says, you will have no way of contacting me. This is the only contact. So that's why they're pleading for proof of life. That's why they are begging, because they have no idea how to get in touch with this person.
We also now know why these notes are getting so much attention, even though law enforcement still isn't publicly confirming if they're even legit. It has to do with what they say about specific items at Nancy Guthrie's home.
They do mention an Apple Watch, as the FBI said, and they do mention the floodlight, the damaged floodlight. There is something else, and it is the placement of the Apple Watch, which has not come out. And if that placement is accurate, I'm sure that is something that puts this letter on the FBI's radar.
And that second deadline I mentioned, the FBI says the second deadline is Monday. And RV11 tells us the note indicates that that deadline is much more consequential. Police insist they still have no suspect or person of interest, but we did learn this. The blood that was found on Guthrie's front porch belongs to her. And the timeline of what happened is getting clearer. Guthrie took an Uber from her house to her daughter's home at about 5:32 p.m. on Saturday. She was dropped off back at her house at 9:48. Now, fast forward 4 hours, and we're at 1:47 a.m. on Sunday. The doorbell camera disconnects, a doorbell camera that's now missing. The camera software detected a person on camera at 2:12 a.m., but the software didn't retain the footage. And at 2:28 a.m., Guthrie's pacemaker app, it lost connection to her phone. And it was just before noon when her family got home and went to her home and reported her missing. So here's where we are. There's no suspect. There's no proof of life. No indication whoever took her will make contact again. And about 4 days until the second, more consequential deadline. And remember the urgency here, because Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old and has now been 5 days without her medication. The sheriff says the reward for information that gets her back is now $50,000. And he urges for help, but also for hope.
People are always asking, do I believe she's alive? Absolutely. Absolutely. There's nothing to say she isn't. And so we have to live on that.
Tonight, we have a team of reporters, law enforcement experts covering every new aspect of this case. And believe me, there are many. We begin with Brianna Whitney, who was outside the Pima County Sheriff's Department tonight. It was actually at the news conference earlier today. She is a reporter with Arizona's 3 TV and CBS 5 and host of True Crime Arizona Live. Brianna, you were the one who asked that very key question that got the FBI to reveal that there were
piece of information, because that's going to tell us really how they're going forward with deeming whether this ransom note is legit or not. So eventually the FBI special agent in charge said the first deadline tonight at 5 p.m. We know that that has since passed, and it was right after it passed that Savannah Guthrie posted another video with her brother this time, pleading with the abductor to come forward and contact them with more information. We know that the second deadline is sometime on Monday, but the FBI didn't go into detail at what time that is and what more of a demand the person is making. They did say it is very unusual that by this point in time, if they receive a ransom note, that they wouldn't have had any contact with the kidnapper or the abductor or any sense of communication with them. This is really odd. And so if Monday passes and there still is no communication, still no proof of life, then I think that's when the FBI will look at, is this credible? Probably and possibly not.
That's a big gamble if you're the family to think about all those factors. And one of the big questions that we had when we last spoke, just last night, was why was there so much new activity at the home yesterday? What have you been able to learn?
Yeah, and that's something that I asked the sheriff today too, because we were all wondering that. They had seemingly processed the scene. He had told us that. And then all of a sudden you had crime tape going back up and you had agents bringing out new pieces of evidence. So I asked him, was there something specific that made you guys go back out there? Did you get a new tip or a new lead and you needed to go investigate inside the home again? He said, for the most part, they obviously want to make sure that they got everything, but because there's so many agencies that are part of this investigation, including the FBI wanted to then go into the house and see everything based on what they know at this point in the investigation. Now, he didn't go into detail as to what exact evidence was taken out of the home. We can assume that whatever was taken out, they're doing possibly DNA testing on. They're looking at, any sort of evidence that they could get from that. But when asked about, well, why did you close down the scene and allow family and media and neighbors to walk up to the door and walk all over there and then, have it be, for lack of a better word, a crime scene again. He said Monday morning quarterback. Yeah, the sheriff's department should not have opened that scene back up. They probably should have kept it secure because you do have other agencies coming in who want to see for themselves what's in there. And if there's other evidence to be collected, they want to be able to do so. But I asked the sheriff, I said, so you could have a contamination of the scene then now. And he said, we'll leave that up to the courts to decide.
Brianna Whitney, now a Monday deadline. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's turn now to former Navy SEAL commander and hostage working group coordinator for the U.S. Embassy in Iraq, Dan O'Shea, also former NYPD hostage negotiator, Wally Zines. Glad to have both of you here because, Wally, I want to get your read on these two deadlines in the alleged ransom note. Why do you think they gave these two separate deadlines, spaced several days apart?
Well, you got to understand first important thing in any hostage negotiation, you have to have another person to talk to. You have to have the good guy and the bad guy. And if you don't have another person to talk to you, you have no negotiating going on. And that's one of the problems you have here. And when you talk about deadlines, you can bring up the point to them is that, hey, you want Bitcoins. We have to go get Bitcoins. We have to do this in relationship to work with a bank. We have to work with having it shipped. So the deadlines can be moved from our part if we have a conversation. You must have two people. You can't just be talking to yourself. And that's the way that works. In relationship to the crime scene, what you mentioned, it's very common to go back to a crime scene. We always expand a crime scene when we get more information and more evidence to follow through. So that's something that is a common practice. In relationship to that crime scene,
Sure.
They should always keep it taped off. And one of the other things in relationship to that is anyone who walks into that crime scene now, we always take their name, their shield, and what command they come from. So we have a steady roster of everyone that's coming into that particular area.
I'm sure that becomes an interview list at some point in time, too. Dan, I want to pick up on this idea of the ransom notes in particular, and the idea of, look, you can't negotiate with yourself, but I do wonder if that's precisely the point here, because Savannah Guthrie's brother, Cameron, appeared in the new video message tonight, asking for the abductor or abductors to reach out because the note has no contact information. The way that Wally's describing it is a question of leverage, right? You have no leverage to negotiate if the person will not communicate with you. Is that the precise motivation of the person who's asking for the money?
Well, as was pointed out by my colleague previously, you need two people to be talking to make a deal. Right now, the ransom demands have gone to media networks. There hasn't been a direct correlation. There hasn't been a proof of life provided by the kidnappers, proving they actually have Mrs. Guthrie in custody, that she's still alive, and that she's still good. And that's where we have the point that, are they really motivated by money? I think there may be, to the point that they're ideologically driven. They're consuming the media that's driven on this case with the deadlines, with the focus of the U.S. president, with the head of the FBI. The entire nation is focused on this case, but they are not acting in good faith in doing this negotiation. So you have to wonder, what do these deadlines really mean? Are they just ratcheting it up for the news media focus, or are they really trying to make a deal to get Miss Guthrie home to her family?
You know, you have to wonder about that. A third way to look at it, though, is that they want a purely transactional connection here, and they have no interest in being persuaded, which tells me maybe a different sort of criminal profile that we'll look at later on in the show as well. Wally, TMZ's Harvey Levin says that the ransom note included something that has not been publicly reported yet, the placement, apparently, of Nancy Guthrie's Apple Watch. Does that make it, the letter, appear to be more legit in your view, if there is something specific that they can chew over in law enforcement?
Well, that's very important. You know, when you talk to the individuals, if you ever get that conversation where you start to negotiate, first of all, the negotiation starts off, as mentioned, they want to see if Nancy is still alive. They want to have some indication that she is there. And, you know, keep in mind one thing, you know, AI is a big product now that we have a lot of dealings to deal with. I mean, they can take a voice and put it in AI. They can make a picture and make it move like a movie in AI. But you have to be able to beat that system too. So if they did do something like that, you would want to have some sort of indication like, tell me, what's my mom's password in case she has a problem? Or what did she get us for Christmas 3 years ago? That would throw AI off right away. But in relationship to the contacts, what's going on inside, you have to look at the letter that was sent or the email that was sent, and you have to go with the premise that it is real until you can disprove it. And that's a very important part of the whole case. There are little things that come in there that no one else knows about, and they will come and bring that specific thing up if they have in fact found something that has to do with the letter and inside the residence.
Yeah, it certainly explains why law enforcement would want to be a little bit tight-lipped, Dan, about what they're releasing to the public, so they could confirm different details like that, as opposed to giving everyone the whole enchilada, so to speak. But let me ask you, Dan, how do you get someone to communicate in this situation who is not offered a way to communicate, who is not followed up, who is not providing proof of life? Is there a way to draw them to the table?
Well, again, I believe that they're violating the rules of how this business is played. If it's truly a kidnap for ransom, they're going to negotiate. It's just like every major deal. You do things behind the door to get the deal on the other side, and you make concessions, but you don't want to publicly admit to what you did. And the fact that they're not showing good faith, they haven't given proof of life. They're negotiating through media outlets. TMZ is a gossip channel, and they're sending a ransom demand to a Hollywood gossip channel. So that's where I have concerns that they're driving this and they're putting it on the public and the timeline, because obviously the sensitivities about her age, her medication, and her health. So I believe these abductors are not acting in good faith, and that's where I think